All right, thank you. Welcome. We're here to talk about innovation in waste, and that's really important. We have a National Waste Policy Action Plan that has some pretty rigorous diversion targets that we need to meet. We have a circular economy that we need to implement, and everything underneath that. So a fundamental part of that is going to be innovation. We need people to innovate and create new projects and new technologies, new processes. So I'm really excited to hear from everyone here today. A little bit of housekeeping. Remember, if you have questions for the presenters, you can put them in on the Q&A in the app. Everyone except for Hannah will do Q&A from the audience at the end. Just after Hannah's presentation, we'll do a quick Q&A with her so she can leave early. I will hand over now to Lara Barclay, Managing Director of Adaptation Environmental Support, to talk to you about her presentation.
Hello, everybody. Is that working? Hello. Last day of the conference. It's nice to see that at least a few people have come after the dinner last night. Look, I'm really thrilled to have the opportunity to give you an update on Recyclemate today. We presented last year when it had only just gone live and was only a few months since the national rollout. Today I'm not going to talk so much about it. So anyone who has heard of Recyclemate, they say, oh yeah, that's that app, isn't it? But what I'm actually going to do is take you a little bit behind the scenes of Recyclemate and some of the really extensive learnings that we're finding from the community questions that we're getting through the program. We all talk about programs and the fact it's really hard to get the community to get it right. We've got high contamination rates, trying to encourage more reuse, repair. But the most important stakeholder in all of that is our community and actually getting it right when we're talking to them, but not so much when we're talking to them, but when we're listening to them. And we're hearing from our community what it is that they're confused about and particularly the language that they use. So I'll take you through. I have got 1,000 slides, so I'm going to go through a rapid rate. So just firstly, for those of you that don't know what Recyclemate is, it's a national recycling education collaboration. It's an initiative of the Australian Council of Recycling with funding support from the New South Wales EPA and the federal government. And it was with the federal government support that allowed us to roll it out nationally and to take it beyond just looking at curbside contamination to actually all the away from home recovery options. So when we talk about, initially when it was just looking at we need to reduce contamination in the curbside bin, but a factor in trying to do that is not only what doesn't go in the bin, but actually where does it go? Because we need to be able to give people positive instructions for where to take things. And now that's also going beyond getting things out of the yellow bin, the green bin, but also getting things out of the general waste. And that's not just the dangerous items that we don't want in our curbside system, but all of the materials that have positive recovery options, repair and reuse options beyond the curbside system. The way that it works as well, there's been a lot of talk about AI. I'll touch on the AI. It's not the main focus of the presentation today, but the way the app works is it allows people to take a photograph of an item, and if the AI works, that's great. It takes a long time to develop the AI, so I'll just touch on that briefly. But what we can build much, much faster is our word search capability, and I'll talk about that mostly today. Then it also has the option that if people still can't get the answer to their question, that they can send us an email directly. So what the app will do is it creates that email automatically where it puts in the item that they're looking for and the local government area that they're in. Because as you know, it's different rules in different areas. And I'm already going the wrong way. So just to give you a tiny bit of an overview of the scope of Recyclemate at the moment, we launched in December 21. Nationally, I should say we launched. We had a prototype up and running in New South Wales before that. And when we launched, we had all coverage of all curbside bin systems across Australia. Harmonisation. How many curbside bin systems do you think there are? Anyone want to have a guess? There's currently 80. When we released the app, that was based mostly on desktop review of curbside bin systems because we were building it during COVID. And we had about 40 systems when we went live. And then once we went around in those first few months, once it was live, a lot of councils run more than one bin system. And so we were very quickly up to 80 different bin systems. But a big part of that is actually shining the light on those different bin systems, the number of households, because just simple thing like everyone having the same coloured lids for the same waste streams. You could actually get it down to 10. So that's part of the data that we feed back in terms of that complexity just in the bin system. We also had 4,000 items in our search taxonomy. Because we're getting the community questions through where people still can't get the answer, we're now up to 6,000 items that people can search from. And a big part of that is language. We have a culturally diverse community. If people can't get the answer they're looking for because they're using a different language for the same item, they won't find the solution. So I might say thong. There's some great recovery options for thongs. The Kiwi in my office will call it a jandal and the English member will call it a flip-flop. So we just put all of those in to help people get the answer to their question. Oh, there's also 900 organisations now contributing data to the back end. So really what I just want to focus on today, there's so much around it, but really just giving you a little bit of insight in terms of how people ask questions about recycling. I think might surprise you, but I think, if you look at the average A to Z guide, probably the best guide would be 250 items. Now with 6,000 items, we still get questions coming through from the community because they can't find what they're looking for. The other aspect of it too is people often say to me, yeah, but you're only talking to the converted. Not everyone's going to download an app. And so how do we actually reach the broader community? So the other thing I just want to touch on too is how we're visualising our data and how we're working to actually expand so that we can actually get our data out to other organisations so people don't have to come to us. So here's just a starter, and I've only just taken some tiny samples. Can everyone read that? This is just a few snippets of how people search for information. And we find we get a lot of stuff comes through by brand, and quite often brand only. So we'll have to go back and say, well, is that the packaging or is that the product or what is it that you're actually looking for? So photos are really, really important. We always ask people to send us a photo. Obscure items, a Mozzie zapper, a vinyl, travel wallet. And so what we do is when we get these community questions in, first of all, we have to A, understand what they're asking, B, find them a solution if there is one, because quite often it's not just can this go in my recycling bin or not, but is there a better opportunity for me to reuse or repair or recycle this away from home? A lot of stuff, yes, is still going back in the general waste. Organics. There's been a lot of talk about FOGO and simplification, and it's food. It's just food. Food to different people, though, they'll still come and they'll want to, basically check. But does that include dog food? But what about 2 litres of milk? Could I tip 2 litres of... Obviously, we don't want people to waste the milk, but if, it's spoiled, can I put 2 litres of milk in my FOGO? We get some comedians, my husband, my wife, my friend, but, we send them back some cute responses. And but it's really interesting because we sort of in our office, we think, well, hang on, we're supposed to be experts in recycling, but I can't tell you how long we debated, can you put a goldfish in your FOGO? You can put your fish scrap in the FOGO, so why not your goldfish? And I don't want to tell you how long we actually spent on that. Would anyone know how to answer that question? You'd say yes? Yeah? Well, I mean, the long and the short of it, at the end of the day, we don't eat our goldfish. We don't know if it's diseased. If you say yes to a goldfish, well, then maybe you then need to say yes to the pet rabbit. And then before you know, you've got the dog and maybe the wife or the husband. So, yeah. And the other thing with it too is that, sometimes people will say to us, well, look, it's probably okay, but I probably wouldn't want too much of that going in the recycling or too much of that in the organics. But we can't say maybe. It has to be black and white, yes or no. Does this go in or does this not go in? And then the other thing too is because we don't make the rules, we check with the local councils, the local areas, the local schemes to make sure that we're only diverting the right materials to the right locations. Plastic. You're probably not surprised to know that about 20% of the inquiries that we get are about plastic. A lot of the old recycling information would be plastic, metal, paper and cardboard. One council that we were talking to that had about a 25% contamination rate, a lot of it's scrap metal. So what's on the top of your bin? Metals? Okay, so the community probably will interpret that. It's metal, it can go in the recycling bin. So just greater clarification of, no, actually, we only mean aluminium cans and steel cans. So it helps that when these questions come through, yes, it might be recyclable, just not in your curbside system. I'll go through these a bit faster. Electronics. There's been a lot of talk about electronics, and this is a really interesting one because this is where we're finding that sometimes we don't have an answer. When we started, we had 8 different categories of electronic waste. And the way Recyclemate works is because we have such granular items, we have to group them all up, and we create what's called a waste ticket. And that waste ticket means that those items are accepted at a different location, whether it's a community recycling centre, mobile muster, tech collect locations. So we're now up to 32 different categories of electronic waste because that's the level of granularity that we need to get to be able to send different electronic items to different locations. And I can guarantee you not one member of the community has asked me how to recycle an e-waste. We have the soft plastics. We don't get asked how do I recycle a soft plastic. It's probably a branded dog food bag. So what we're doing, so in the back end, we have all of that grouped into soft plastics. When Red Cycle was discontinued, we updated that within 5 hours. We had to hibernate. We had nearly 3,000 soft plastic locations. And we hibernated that, but they're still sitting there hibernated so that as councils start to introduce their soft plastic recycling again, we can just switch on that waste ticket for the different areas that accept it. Actually, one of the things I didn't mention too is that Recyclemate, the way it works is that it moves with you. So it geolocates where you are, so it's giving you the correct information for your curbside system. And then every away from home option is geolocated, so it gives you the directions on how to get there as well. So it's a one-stop shop. You don't get directed off to other sites, that you can actually get all the information within the program. So what we're finding is happening with some electronics, big problem too, because batteries, you don't want them in the bins. A lot of products with an integrated battery, so kids' toys, flashing Christmas decorations, there's often no option. So you don't want to see this. Don't put it in your bin, but sorry, we haven't got anywhere for you to take that. So we're constantly taking this information back to the councils. We had a guy in Western Australia contact us and say, your app is encouraging me to dump my rubbish in the bush. We're a bit like, what? What do you mean? Over there, aerosol cans can't go in the curbside system, and within 50 kilometres of his radius, there was no alternative. But through that community feedback, we were able to go in, and we did find somewhere that he could take that aluminium can, the aerosol can, and then we can continually be updating the information. And that's the real community drive behind Recyclemate. Every community question asked, every time somebody else gets involved, the data just keeps improving and expanding. Because our view is that if one person's asking the question, probably guaranteed there's a lot of other people out there that want to know the answer. So this information we're now feeding back not only at the local government level, but also state government. We've got 32 categories of electronic waste. Quite often you'll find that there's not an option for a lot of those, and they end up going back in the bin. So as I mentioned, the item taxonomy, it's helping to bridge the gap, I guess, between how the community is asking questions and when we don't have the answer. And we're not doing that on our own. As I said, we need everyone involved in this. We, as I said, don't run programs, recycling programs. What we're doing is just helping link the community to what they're looking for and what the solution is. So we're always super sleuthing and having to find answers to the questions. And then interestingly too, we also are trying to get more volume so that we're not just talking to the converted and get more people into Recyclemate. And we quite often put interesting queries through our socials. This simple post that we did for a sushi fish, bit of plastic. Now, most of you I know will say we shouldn't have them anyway. This is something we should be phasing out. But right now we still do have them. We had 1,000 downloads of the app in one day, which seemed to be attributed to this one social media post. So there's a lot of interest. We couldn't believe how much just this little tiny fish generated. And of course, a lot of that around, we'll get rid of them, we don't need them. I just want to briefly touch on the AI. There's so much I can't go into, but we also do annual focus group research where we talk to the community attitudes and behaviours to recycling. And one of the things that really struck us in our latest research is that community confidence is actually really high. People think they're really good at recycling. But then when we question them, and it's very similar to the research that Cleanaway do, people are getting it wrong. And so our recommendation, you've got to break community confidence. They think they're really doing it well. And people often don't ask questions either. So how do we even get them to ask questions? And how do we get from just talking to the converted? This is a great example. Everyone says you've got to educate the kids. Anyone here have or had teenagers? Yeah. They're not little eco-warriors. They don't care. So this is my son's basketball team came into the office one day and they were looking around all the posters and saying, what do you do here? And I started talking about recycling. You could just see the mist of glaze and boredom just set in, you know. So I said, right, get out your phones. So they all got out their phones. I said, download this app. I showed them how the AI worked. And they went from absolute can't be bothered talking about this to tearing the place apart, taking photos of anything they could, laughing when it gets it wrong. I mean, I've had once it tell me a book was a bra because maybe it was the cover of the book. But that was part of the engagement. And because then when it did correctly identify something, you know, they were cheering. And then the conversation then quickly changed to, oh, I didn't know I couldn't put that in my recycling bin. I always put that in my recycling bin. So the AI aspect of it, while it takes a lot to develop, we have to take photos, or have to get lots and lots of photos of rubbish. And it's also to the way that people use it. We don't have any control over how far away from the camera they are when they take a photo, interference from different items as well. But the AI is something that we're absolutely further building because it is so engaging for people. And I had another child at a cricket game for an hour, went around the field taking photos of anything they could just to see if they can get the app to work. So when it does work well with the AI, I've used the coffee cup example because yes, 50% of people still put these in their recycling bin. But the main thing that we want to do is say, first of all, please don't put this in your recycling, put it in the general waste, because that's what the majority of people will do. Not everyone is as committed as the majority of people here. But if you are, haven't phased out the single-use cup, still have one, and then want to look at recycling it, Simply Cups now have about 900 public drop-offs nationally. So that will take you to your nearest location. Something else that's really coming through as well is that we're really seeing that waste management, resource recovery is really, really evolving. I hate to admit that I can still remember the backyard incinerator. So when we even just got a garbage bin, that was exciting. But now waste management, resource recovery is no longer really just a council community service. It's really a community problem. And a community, we need community solutions. And for all of the away from home recovery options that we have, about 9 out of 10 now are not council run. So that's a lot of information that what we find is because people will still naturally go to their council for information. But if 9 out of 10 of those local opportunities are not council run, it's really hard for a local council to have to keep all that information up to date and know what's available. So because Recyclemate provides that information, we're now looking at ways that we can actually make that more accessible where people will look for the information. And probably one of the things I should have mentioned at the start too is I say it's Recyclemate, but Recyclemate covers reuse, redeem, repair, compost as well. But just Resource Recovery Mate doesn't sound quite as catchy as Recyclemate, but we do look for all of those options into community areas. So what we're doing now is some of the problem with the uptake with the recycling app is that, yes, it's the converted, but also to a lot of organisations, they want to have their own branding. They can't, or sometimes have limitations with using another product that has somebody else's branding. So what we're now doing is we have a widget link that is currently under development that we can actually embed that back into, say, for instance, a council website or an organisational website so that at a local level, getting the benefit all of the national collaboration of Recyclemate and the national questions that are being asked, because we're continually learning and feeding it back into the system. So rather than 540 councils all having to do that individually, by collaborating with Recyclemate, can have the benefit of that back into the local council area. And what that does, it's customised just for the council bin systems and customised for the opportunities within the local council area. So for instance, if it was a mobile phone search, don't want that to go in any bins, but then it will direct the community to all of their local options that they can drop off a phone. I also mentioned too, well, what do we do if people are not even asking questions? So there are so many great opportunities out there for the reuse and the repair and the recycling, but if people don't even know what question to ask, how do we actually better get an understanding of all of these away from home options? So this is also brand new. We're starting to now look at, well, how do we visualise our data and actually make that more easy for people to actually find these locations? So this just gives you a visual overview of Victoria and New South Wales, and this is everything. So the green blobs sort of recommend as when there's lots of different locations. But as you start to zoom in, it'll start to expand out, and then you get more information about what's in those local areas. So 10 cents, that's a redeem. Hearts, charities. Recycling symbol is a recycling location. We've also got compost hubs, which are little leaf, and repair cafes as well are also going to get their own icon. And when you zoom even further, so I've gone from this is a dark mode in Sydney to a light mode in Melbourne, but this just shows you just a tiny part of the Melbourne CBD and how many drop-offs there are now for different items. I mean, one of the arguments that people say, well, look, I'm not going to drop things off, I'm driving my car, I'm using petrol. But because you're getting so many more opportunities back into the locations where you probably go anyway, just helping people actually understand, well, where are they and what can I take back there? So that's the waste ticket link back to these locations. We can do this by scheme. So this is New South Wales container deposit schemes. And you can see as you start to zoom in, you can see all the different locations. Do it by LGA, Hornsby. I don't know if anyone's here from Hornsby. And what we find too is that we do our best to get information into the system from what we can gather nationally. But as more councils, community groups get involved, the local data just keeps getting better and better because no one knows their local area, like the locals. And they can let us know about all of those smaller one-off social enterprise community organisations. And then also, as I mentioned, helping out with the gap analysis. If you want to ban electronics from landfill, you need to make sure that there's community access to drop-off points. And so just quickly as well, as I mentioned, 900 organisations, and how do we keep all this up to date? So every organisation that contributes information into the back end of Recyclimate, it's not our data, it's theirs. So they have a data account, and we've actually just upgraded our data hub. We're very excited about a new one. So you go in, it's password protected, so that only people that you approve can access your data. So you log in, there's a data sharing agreement to basically just confirm how we're going to use information that people sign off on, and you may have one scheme or organisation that you have access to, but if you're a regional waste coordinator, you might have a number of council accounts that you have access to. So the first thing you do, so Rig Recycle give me the okay to give them a little promo today. For those of you that don't know Rig Recycle, they're taking fishing tackle and plastics, so they've got drop-offs, trying to get them out of the environment. So when they go into the account, you basically have the scheme overview, and this is the information that we use publicly when we're promoting their locations in Recyclimate. They can update that. Their contacts, so they can go in at any time and see who has access to their account and amend those details. The items accepted, if it's only a small number of items, it could be a list, but for some organisations it's quite extensive and they upload an Excel spreadsheet. All of their locations, it could be anything from one social enterprise to 4,000 to the schemes and recyclers that are collecting nationally. One of the new developments really excited about too is that because we link to Google Place ID, a lot of people would say, can you change my photo? Can you change the name of my organisation? We can't because we don't control the Google Place ID, but we've now built in new functionality to override that, so if people want to better promote their scheme or their program at a location, they can in the app as well. And then it gives them a map, so they can actually see as a lot of these schemes are rolling out, they can see how they sit against the population density as well. So I know that's quite a lot and I've gone through it quite quickly, but the power of Recyclimate is collaboration. The power of Recyclimate is that it's community driven, constantly finding answers to community questions, and that community is not just the community that we're trying to help, but the broader local government, industry, community that are getting involved in helping to provide that information to the community as well. So I've just got this quick video just to show you, I guess, the power of what we can achieve at a collaborative level. Just a quick whiz around Australia at all of these opportunities. Obviously these are just the orange blobs, but this is a combination of store drop-off, community compost hubs, repair cafes, social enterprises, community facilities, council facilities, community recycling centres, and with all of those granular 6,000 different items that are all waste ticketed to where they can go. And it's just the start. I mean, gosh, the expansion just within 12 months. So if this is relevant to any of you, we'd love to hear from you to get involved and just continue to build on this. Thank you.
Wow. Thanks very much, Lara. I can only imagine the mammoth task of keeping all of those up to date. It would be a lot. I forgot to ask for the presenters in the room. We want to get an idea of who's in the audience before we move on. Can I get a raise of hands here if you're from local government? A lot of you. So hopefully you're going to reach out to Lara and get some widgets embedded on your website. Commercial and industry, raise your hands. Okay. Charity, not-for-profits. And who have I missed? No one. Consulting, oh, sorry. Okay, so we're going to move on to Hannah Elias, who's a circular economy consultant at Edge Impact. And a reminder, Hannah will be asking questions at the end of her presentation, so get some ready.
Thank you. Sorry to dash off after. I think I got the last seat leaving Coffs Harbour today. So, yeah, open to questions after. So, good morning. My name is Hannah Elias. I'm a circular economy consultant at Edge Impact. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we're a full spectrum sustainability and impact consultancy. So work across a range of different areas, and I happen to work in the circular economy space. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some work that we recently undertook with the Illawarra Shoalhaven joint organisation, so working with the vet bars and the team, looking at an evidence-based approach to identify circular economy opportunities for the region. So today I'll share a bit of a background and the methodology that we sort of took, and some of the opportunities that came out of that, which I think might be of interest. But before I get stuck into that, I would just like to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of so-called Australia, and pay my respects to the Gimbaigi people and elders past, present and emerging. So to just share a bit about the project, sort of the background of the project. So we were looking at opportunities that could be implemented over a 5-year time frame. So phase 1 of the work was really looking to identify those opportunities and take quite a rigorous approach to do so. And that will be followed by phase 2, looking at the implementation of those opportunities. So the main objectives of the work were to look at opportunities to increase value retention of materials, so really looking at those higher order outcomes, to divert targeted materials from landfill in alignment with the strategic priorities, so considering the region's strategic sort of goals, but also at a state and a national level, and to identify leadership opportunities in circular economy solutions, so particularly looking at some of those more complex materials that might not account for a high tonnage of waste generated, but opportunities to really advance our capabilities to process and divert those. So I'll run you through just at a high level sort of how we approach this work, and then I'll dive into a bit more detail around some of the technical aspects in a second. I'll try to keep the technical stuff as interesting as possible on the last day of the conference. So firstly, we conducted a material flow analysis. So Jess Braun from our team really led this work to provide that sort of data baseline to identify the opportunities in the later stages. And then sort of concurrently, we looked at an opportunity assessment. So this was sort of our discovery phase, taking that data approach, but also desktop research and talking with stakeholders to really understand the existing sort of capability and capacity within the region. We then, so off the back of that, we sort of had a long list of opportunities, and then we took those into a workshop with key stakeholders. So we had the local governments in the room, some state government representatives, and research institutions to prioritise those opportunities, also taking into account the perspectives of industry who weren't present to sort of understand the opportunities to progress there. And then from those prioritised opportunities, we conducted a more detailed analysis, so cost-benefit analysis and some really high-level carbon modelling to get an understanding of the costs and benefits to be realised out of those. And then presented the findings and the sort of outcomes in the sense of the feasibility of those opportunities and next steps for ISJO. In terms of the value of the project, it really provides an opportunity to unlock the benefits, or presents the business case in a sense, to unlock the benefits of a circular economy for the region. So we found that there was close to $12 million of economic benefit through the 3 most feasible opportunities, as well as carbon emission reduction opportunities, and again, that leadership opportunity for some more complex materials. It also highlighted the opportunity for growth and resilience, so as well as the sort of economic factors at play, it highlighted opportunity across the 5 main sort of initiatives explored to recirculate 37,000 tonnes of materials each year, at the same time as really looking to leverage that local capability of the region, of which there's a lot, to help to strengthen supply chains. And finally, the work provided an evidence base of the economic, environmental and social impacts, really linked with those strategic priorities, again, to help with that next phase of work around the implementation and to support some of the funding opportunities. So to dive a little further into the sort of evidence-based approach that was taken, so as I mentioned earlier, we conducted a material flow analysis, so looking at key materials being wasted in the region, their flow pathways, and the sector from which those materials were being generated. So the material flow analysis looked from the consumption phase through to the end-of-use management of materials and covered council-managed waste, commercial and industrial waste, and construction and demolition. So just to show a sort of taste of what came out of that work, so it provided an understanding of the waste materials sort of generated within the region. So you can see on the screen that rubble, concrete and garden organics sort of had the highest tonnage of material generated. The colours are a little misleading. So in yellow you can see that while there's a lot of those materials generated, the yellow shows that only a sort of small amount of those materials is being sent to landfill. We also had a detailed understanding of being able to zoom in within that data and understand waste materials being sent to landfill. So we understood that paper and cardboard, hazardous waste and food organics were sort of potential areas of opportunity, and food organics ended up becoming one of the focus materials, again linking back to some of those strategic priorities and the existing capability of the region with reprocessors. And also within that we had, linking back to the sector sort of breakdown of the data, we could understand, say for food organics, we had an overview of sort of what sectors those materials were being generated from to help to sort of hone in on the opportunities. And we also had an overview of materials retained in the productive economy. This might be a bit hard to read, but on the left you can see the materials, and to the right the sector within which those materials were reused or recycled. So having that sort of strong data baseline to build upon, we then conducted desktop research, so looking at the economic profile of the region to help to understand some of the end market opportunities for some of the focus materials. Also looking at those strategic priorities as mentioned, and infrastructure, so considering what's in the region or nearby, the throughput and any sort of capacity gaps to help to understand that piece, and looking at best practice for the region, or best practice nationally and beyond, to help to understand what could be applied to the region. And also in that discovery phase and throughout the project as well, we conducted stakeholder engagement. It was a really big part of the project in terms of understanding the different perspectives of people operating in that space, but also taking people on the journey. So in this particular phase, that stakeholder engagement really focused on the barriers and enablers for the region, as well as the sort of appetite for change and speaking with people to identify from their perspective any opportunities that they saw as relevant. So then building on that, we had a list of opportunities which I keep speaking to vaguely. I promise I'll introduce them soon. And we conducted cost-benefit modelling on those, as well as high-level carbon modelling. So the opportunities themselves. So we grouped them into two sort of different buckets. So we looked at enabling opportunities. So there's things that could really be driven by ISTO and or member councils to help to sort of enable circularity across a wide range of materials and sectors. And then we considered opportunities to sort of really expand and elevate the circular economy. So these were more specifically focused on some of those target materials. So for the enabling opportunities, we recommended a platform for recirculating materials, so something like the Aspire platform that enables those business-to-business connections for materials to be recirculated. We also explored with ISTO and the team opportunity around localised circular procurement with councils. So again, looking at opportunities to really achieve that scale there through things like guidelines, decision-making toolkits to again help to create end markets for those materials. And also explored a collaborative model, so in different forms, again, that can take, whether that's a working group, memorandum of understanding, or those sort of types of levers that can be pulled to help to really have that group to drive change. These are sort of the basics, I guess, in a circular economy, but we know that there's no silver bullet approach, and it's quite, important to have that foundation to help to drive the change for the more material-focused opportunities that will follow. So for those opportunities, within them we sort of group them at an opportunity level, and there's multiple sort of initiatives sitting within them. There's a bit to it, so I'll give you a couple of examples, but just introduce them more broadly. So looking at elevating circular outcomes for commercial and industrial food organics, I'll dive into that in a bit more detail shortly. We also explored a circular textiles hub. So for example, that focused on looking at opportunities to encourage the use of charities and similar services, looking at events for sort of repair or styling events to help to prolong the life of textiles, and also conducted, and this is where the cost benefit and carbon modelling was applied to, looking at opportunities to onshore manual sorting of textiles to help to expand Australia's capability to onshore that textile recycling, which is not a simple one to solve. Within this, we also explored a circular e-product hub, so again, looking at a range of different initiatives within that and focusing on e-products like washing machines, phones, tablets, a range of different e-products and initiatives within that. Exploring opportunities to elevate circular outcomes for timber and garden organics, so a key focus within that opportunity is looking at biochar production and understanding that some of the opportunities but also the constraints for that. And expanding circular outcomes for plastics with a particular focus on soft plastics. So just to take a bit of a deep dive on the opportunity around elevating circular outcomes for commercial and industrial food organics. So sort of the output of that discovery phase and some of that earlier work gave us an overview of the current state. So as I mentioned before, we had a view to the sort of sector where organic material or food organics were coming from. So we can see on the screen that households accounted for a large portion of organics going to landfill, but we also understand that Shoalhaven have a facility coming online to reduce that, so that moving forward there will be a shift there. And so the strategic focus here was to look at the commercial and industrial sector, and particularly focusing on small and medium enterprises, understanding that there's some really big challenges faced for the recovery of organics from those smaller businesses, so looking at opportunities there. So the initiatives within this included a targeted food organic waste campaign for businesses to help to bridge the gap between existing services and barriers relating to collections. So really touching on that sort of education and engagement piece. And the second was looking at on-site valorisation of food waste at a sort of precinct level to provide an innovative solution while also removing or reducing the cost of waste transport, which again, particularly for those small and medium businesses, is a big challenge. So through that opportunity, we looked at black soldier fly larvae, so locating that on site at a precinct level to help to reduce some of those challenges. And again, linking this in with strategic priorities, particularly at a state level, but also nationally. So the initiative that was modelled within this was the on-site valorisation, as mentioned. So through the black soldier fly larvae, we found that in terms of circulating materials, that close to 3,000 tonnes of materials could be recirculated in the economy over the assessment period. From an economic viewpoint, this was seen to be quite beneficial. So 1.4 million in net present value to be realised, but also looking at the avoided waste management costs to sort of provide that fuller picture of the benefits to be gained. In terms of carbon savings, close to 4,000 tonnes of carbon emission savings over the assessment period, and also consideration of the social aspects, so looking at job creation and opportunities there. So this was provided for each of those opportunities that were explored and mentioned earlier, as well as recommendations. So for the organics, a recommendation around promoting the business case for that on-site valorisation of business food waste, looking at pursuing public funding to support the uptake, a feasibility assessment, and looking again at that education piece. That's sort of the overview of the work that was completed with Yvette and the team at ISJO and the member councils of the region as well. We definitely see, we work with a lot of local governments and have done some great work with the Hunter Joint Organisation as well, and really see the sort of tension, I guess, between local governments. It was touched on earlier, sort of carrying a lot of the burden in terms of waste management, and see a real opportunity for impact at scale in the circular economy at that sort of regional level. Would love the opportunity to continue to work in this space, and would encourage, obviously in New South Wales, we're lucky to have that sort of joint organisation and regional organisation of councils model, but more nationally as well, looking at opportunities to really tackle these complex challenges together. And that's it from me. I've got my details up there as well as Yvette's. Any questions you can reach out after, but I think we'll do some questions now as well. Any questions? Can't get off that easy. Thanks, Anna.
Great presentation, thank you. My question was whether ISJO has decided which next steps to go with. You put up some great examples of things they could work on. Are they at the stage yet of picking one? Maybe that's a question for Yvette if she's here, but thanks, Hannah.
Yeah, no worries. I can speak broadly, but Yvette, welcome to speak up. But there's definitely been conversations towards the end of that work around, connecting with Sustainability Advantage and the New South Wales EPA to look to, progress that. But do you want to speak to that, Yvette?
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. We are currently just, I guess, consolidating these ideas and working with our current contacts, as Hannah just said, to create a really practical roadmap forward for the region, and that's working both with state agencies and industry partners.
It's the work really has. It's been fascinating just to see the capability and capacity of the region, and to provide that sort of evidence base in terms of progressing it. But it's definitely that next step around bringing it to life.
Does anyone else have a question? No?
Cool.
Okay, I'll hit you with my question.
Oh, yeah.
So you mentioned that textile recovery is hard to do onshore in Australia. Without spending too much time elaborating on it, what would you say the circuit breaker is? What would you do to be able to improve textile recovery in Australia?
It's a really good question. I'm definitely no expert on the topic, but I think, it's been touched on just in the few presentations that I've heard today, but around the biggest thing we can do is to extend the life of these things. So looking at, I think there's a big piece around changing our consumer perception of those, how we consume textiles. It's great to see some really innovative stuff happening in the charity space with the pop-up at Westfield to sort of encourage that consumption of reusing textiles. And then there's also some really interesting work happening looking at the recovery of textiles, led by Griffith University and CSIRO, doing some great work in that space, looking at, in terms of once those materials are at their end of life, overcoming some of the sort of complex challenges with textiles and mixed materials. And there's a really big gap in Australia around, they see the opportunity in that space, particularly around the sorting of textiles in the first instance. So, some interesting work there. Great, thank you.
I think some very intelligent minds working on that project. Okay, so we'll go straight on to Dave Jones, External Affairs Director and Technical Advisor at OmniGrip Direct, to talk to you.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about this. So I represent OmniGrip Direct. I actually work for a company called Polar Enviro, but one of our brands is OmniGrip Direct. And we were created as an organisation right at the start of COVID. Interesting time to buy 3 companies and bring them together and merge their businesses and create new products. And just as being based in Victoria, everything was locked down and shut down and we couldn't talk to people, we couldn't meet together. But anyway, we're still here, and that's the good thing. But our brands are quite diverse and exciting. Our Safety Path or Smarter Light brand is tackling the issue and the environmental damage that those things cause, exit signs in buildings. There's probably 100 million of them in Australia. They fail because the way they're constructed every 1 to 3, if they're really good quality ones every 5 years, they end up as e-waste. And we've got technology that eliminates the e-waste in one model. No batteries in them, no electronic components, and another model that has a very low level of electronics but no electric battery in them. Some of our models can last between 5 and 10 years, some up to 30 years. And companies like Bunnings are designing their new warehouses to incorporate our technology to eliminate all the issues of failed exit signs in their buildings. But I'm actually not here to talk about that, even though I could actually talk for an hour about it. I'm talking about OmniGrip Direct and its use of recycled glass and colour. Colour in our public spaces and environments, which is primarily of interest, I guess, to the councils in the room. I'm glad there's some here, and perhaps some of the consultants as well. And colour is used in public spaces to convey a message, to define or show the use of a space, to draw attention to it, to create a sense of place. And you can see some examples up there from the Kids Bridge built with for the Children's Hospital project in Perth, where Dulux paints are used on the walls, and we had to colour match to Dulux colours with recycled glass surfaces applied by one of our contractors. A school parking lot, which is the blue, green and yellow at a private college in Melbourne. The pride colours on a street in St Kilda, or even a bike lane outside the Vic Roads office there, or bus lanes, bike paths, yellow pedestrian crossings, many examples using colour. I've got some samples here which I'll pass around the room just to show you both the different sizes of glass. The coarse ones are used on roads, the finer ones are used in off-road environments. and just, as I said, a range of colours that we do. Spread them around, and hopefully 6 come back at the end. But won't be too upset if you take it away and going to do good with it. So, colour is really important in public spaces. People generically see colour on roads and in public spaces and think it's paint. Right? And paint is probably the worst thing you can use because it's basically slippery when it's wet, it's short-lived, it wears off. And unfortunately, local governments and state governments and some landscaping architectural places that have private spaces that they're doing something decorative with, they think of it as paint. They go to a line marking company and they get a paint-based product. And it doesn't last very long. It quickly looks bad. It's slippery when it's wet. When it wears away, paint wears away in a public environment, it's not magic dust that just disappears. It turns to dust that blows away and washes away into the environment, and it's a form of plastic. Our surfaces, we use resin binders and recycled glass that can last, well, testing has shown we're still compliant to state specs within 5 years. There's cases where it lasts 10 years. When we mix other aggregates with it, we've actually got cases where they're still compliant after 18 years on busy arterial roads. So what's really important when you're putting a surface down in a public space is durability of colour. You're putting a colour down, you want the colour to last, you want it to be seen, to define a space as being reserved for bicycle riders or for buses, or a yellow as a pedestrian crossing, so that drivers look for people crossing the road at that place. So yellow is used in Victoria for pedestrian crossings and crosswalks. I don't think it's allowed in New South Wales. Queensland, I'm not so sure about. You want durability of skid and slip resistance. You don't want people to slip on it in the wet and fall over when you're putting a coating on the road surface. You don't want cars braking as they cross a bike lane when they're turning left or right to actually brake and lose control because they skid and slide on it. And you want texture, which is tied to skid resistance, particularly in wet weather. In the texture, it's what sticks up above the film of water in the wet so that the tyres have something to grip to. And every state and territory has a specification about the use of colour on roads, and councils adopt them. The Council of Traffic Engineers or the design consultancies doing work would refer to the state specification, and we meet all those specifications. It's basically the tough ones are along the east coast, the larger states. So they have minimum skid resistance of British pendulum readings of 55 if you're a technical person. They define a minimum texture of 0.6 mil in most cases, 1 mil in some other cases. And colour matching, they require an approximate colour match. It's a very crude test, but basically it's a colour retention test. And every state and territory, of course, has a different coloured green for its bike lanes, a different red for its bus lanes, a different yellow for its pedestrian crossings. But there's some overlap, but different colours also apply. And we can match to those colours. Queensland's interesting. They've acknowledged that with their coloured surfaces on roads, they don't last. And they were having a problem with them not being within spec, sometimes within their defect liability period, and definitely not within spec within 5 years as their specification required. So they now pre-qualify the use of materials where you have to get independent testing done to show your product will actually last within spec for 5 years. And that process is called types. We were the first company, and for a while the only company doing coloured surfaces to get compliance in Queensland to their very tough system of pre-qualification. So the solution, as you've probably guessed, is durable long-life surfaces, 3 to 5 times longer life using Australian recycled glass. We actually divert glass it's waste glass from industrial processes, and we then colour that glass into the choice of colours. Examples on the screen for placemaking projects or the different greens and reds and yellows that are used around the states. And we can make these safety surfaces with different size aggregates for different purposes on and off road and pass all those tests and actually make spaces beautiful and durable using waste diverted from landfill. We don't use it as roadfill, as we call it. We don't crush it up and hide it as sand. The glass is a feature of the surface and it provides the critical properties to make it safe and beautiful. So you can see more examples here. These are to the road spec. So we use an equivalent, though we don't use bottles, but it's the equivalent in weight of glass to about 35 bottles per square metre, per square metre of bike lane or bus lane or pedestrian crossing. And we're very relevant for projects, so if, we've got operations in Queensland and in Victoria, and we're looking to move into New South Wales when the time is right. But there's a recycled first policy that requires state infrastructure projects in Victoria to look at using recycled products in lieu of non-recycled products. What it actually means is that contractors have a target which is different in each contract. They choose a recycled product, they use recycled for that product. Once they meet their target, they stop using recycled products. So sometimes it's our product becomes the target product and we get the benefits of that. Sometimes it's some other, it could be plastic noise walls, it could be recycled glass, concrete curb, substituted into curbing rather than using concrete curbing. And they're not interested in recycled once they pass that point. And that's the unfortunate reality of a well-intended policy. So the policies do need to be tougher. As I said, our products are fully compliant and have a life of at least 5 years and on average about 7 years, sometimes longer, sometimes at the 5-year end, just depending on traffic and wear and tear in the environment that it's in. So you can see there, as I said, pedestrian crossings, there's a council bike lane that's been done in pink, whether it's been closed to traffic, one of the local roads, bus lanes, bike lanes, etc. In the off-road environment, some great use of colour as well, everything from a laneway and a station redevelopment project, the top left green and shades of green and yellow. The railway station was rebuilt as part of the level crossing removal program and it left this laneway as brand new asphalt. The council wanted to do something with it because it connected a car park for a shopping strip. Car parks also used as a market. They said to us, what can you do to make it beautiful? And they had a really low budget for the project. And we actually had leftover glass that had been excess quantities, if you like, very small quantities that had been left over from other projects for other councils. Not enough to do anything with on its own. So our own team came up with that creative pattern where we had all these grates and we tried to give this 3D effect with shades of yellow and green along that laneway. And it's gone really well and been well received by the council. We actually used leftover, so it would have gone probably to landfill if we couldn't find a market for it, glass, which was recycled in the first place, to create a beautiful place. Beneath it, the blue one, council wanted to turn a service lane at the back of a strip shopping centre, make it look like a running stream. So unfortunately there's a shady tree which ruins my photo, but it is a great looking space. But you know, the council it's Yarra Rangers, very environmentally focused. They wanted a running stream using recycled glass. They received a grant from Sustainability Victoria to use recycled materials for this placemaking project, and has drawn people to this laneway. It was a walkthrough to get to the railway station and people walking their dogs, and apparently activity has increased because of this, this project making the space just pleasing to the eye and a feature in its own right. Now down the bottom ones, so here and here, these aren't actually using recycled glass, but it's in the recycling hierarchy as such. It's about diversion of materials from becoming waste. So we can use recycled materials or non-recycled aggregates, so natural aggregates from quarried materials in our resin surfaces. We've found there's a real interest from councils that may have concrete footpaths in strip shopping centres and laneways or asphalts as footpaths. They're structurally sound, they're tired, they could have been down for decades, they could be slippery, worn smooth with people walking on them over decades. In the past, they would have been dug out, sent to licensed landfill as being an asphalt or a small quantity of asphalt, a small quantity of old concrete. If it's structurally sound, we can come through and basically put a very thin coating of resin and recycled glass in the form of patterns or colours, and there's examples on the screen. So avoid the need to send the asphalt and old concrete to waste and recycle and give it a fresh new appearance which has got good slip resistance, good skid resistance if service vehicles happen to go on it. And if they want it to look like a granitic driveway, such as this one here, we we can take a quarried material and actually put it with our resin binding system onto that and give it a totally different appearance. There's actually asphalt underneath that laneway. And here was an old concrete ramp going into a heritage railway station. They need to improve its slip resistance, so we can come along. Sometimes for metro train stations, they use black recycled glass, and we colour it black, or they use black and white, so it's speckles. That one there does look grey. That may be a natural aggregate. I'm not 100% certain on that one. But it's a way of avoiding the need to send concrete and asphalts, if they're still structurally sound, but just tired or slippery. Don't send them to waste. Come along and put a thin coating on top and get perhaps decades more life out of that material. So that's our use of coloured recycled glass, where we're taking glass from industrial waste streams, colouring it and using it for some great purposes in safety on roads and footpaths and placemaking. Then, in comparison to the colour and life of the previous slides, we have high friction surfaces which are not colourful and exciting, but they're an important safety surface. So high friction surfaces, it's a technology that's been around for decades. It first came out of the 1950s using a material called calcined bauxite. It's a highly processed, processed bauxite basically, heat treated, and it's got some really exciting properties in road safety. Moving car tyres, would you believe, the moments of time that a car tyre is on this material when they brake or turn a corner, tyres actually stick to it better than any other material, and it's been around for decades. It's saved probably hundreds of thousands of lives around the world. Huge market for it in the US and the UK, somewhat in Australia, partly because of the distances we are from the international suppliers of this processed mineral. So it's a much safer surface on popular motorcycling routes, like the Great Ocean Road down here. I'm sure there's coastal routes in each of your states and territories where people love motorbike riding, nice tight curves and the excitement of wind in their hair if they didn't have a helmet, ruining it and keeping them alive. But you know, it's that dream of going along these roads, going in the bends too fast, the thrill, but suddenly it's wet because a bit of water, rain overnight, and the water's collected on a sharp bend, and they lose traction and they slide and they hit a pole or a tree and badly injured. But high friction surfaces can actually stop that happening because they can reduce crashes. The Austroads data is there by about 50% in wet weather conditions. On average, 40% for all types of crashes. International studies have found up to 100% reduction in some types of crashes where this surface goes down. It's really important as a part of the toolbox for local governments and state road authorities, but it's a fully imported material. So, and there's some examples there of what it looks like and also how it's used on local roads, Great Ocean Road. They're all locations, and even in car parks, so that on wet ramps as they get wet as cars bring water in their tyres into multi-storey car parks. Developers put this material down so that the vehicles are less likely to slip as they brake on the ramps in the car parks. But we wanted a better way of doing it. We wanted to see whether we could actually use a different material to calcined bauxite and mix it with post-consumer glass out of bins and see if we can come up with a blended material that had similar performance. And so we were fortunate to be able to work with the Australian Road Research Board, and we were their industry partner, and they received a grant from Sustainability Victoria to do some tests of blending different materials together, of which one was a percentage of post-consumer recycled glass, and produce a material that performed better than asphalt and met the state specification for high friction surfaces, which is broadly consistent with all the other states across Australia. This was a Victorian project, so we worked to the Victorian spec. It also meets the Queensland spec, and would have similar crash reduction performances. And this is a sample of the material that was actually developed. I'm not going to reveal the actual blend because that's part of our IP, and obviously several years of research now to work out exactly what that blend was. But we've mixed post-consumer glass with other materials in there to get a surface that we strongly believe, because it meets all the specifications, will save lives on Australia's roads and create a secondary market for the glass being collected out of council recycling bins, as long as it's cleaned and has impurities and the like removed. So we did a whole range of testing, and it did, I'll be crude and say bloody well, in the testing, because the standard test in the Australian Road Research Board's laboratories were to do things like abrasion testing, and it's an international specification and test regime. So they get hardened rubber wheels simulating tyres going back and forth thousands and thousands of times on the surface. So we have an asphalt slab and we put our surface on top to simulate a road. It's left in the outside to weather for several months to reflect a road being out in the weather, and then it's put into this machine and rubbed back and forth. And as you can see, that's at the start, and at the end, you can probably see on there, there's all the broken bits of rubber. The surface is undamaged and unworn, and then the rubber in their machine has been torn to shreds on it. So plus for us, bad luck for the machine. And then they had to think, well, how else can we do it? How can we accelerate the ageing? We need to determine how long this is going to last. So they put steel plates in the machine and said, okay, it's over the top. Let's just see what happens. Will the steel plate destroy it? The answer is no. So then they had a special steel plate made up with steel teeth on it. And they said, let's go insane and just see how long it lasts. Well, a surface lasted with virtually no signs of wear, and it wore the teeth off the machine. And so they sort of threw their hands up. I think it was 10,000 cycles they went to and said it's tough. And so it's going to last on a road and have minimal signs of wear and tear. And so just to compare, and my head's probably in the way with where the screen is, I'll just move to the side here. So we looked at, this is skid resistance, which is one of the test criteria for safety, and we looked at the asphalt itself, we looked at the traditional material, which is called calcined bauxite, we looked at the source materials and different blends of them, and we looked at how they were worn, and each bar corresponds to cycles, so 10,000 cycles, and just how they wore over time. And even with our blends, you can see they're better than asphalt, not quite as good as pure calcined bauxite, which reflects probably the fact that we've got glass in the blend, which is not as hard. All well and truly above specification. Then we did the same for the texture depth, which, as I said earlier, is the importance of wet weather resistance and safety. Asphalt is nowhere near good. The red lines are the different specifications. Asphalt actually didn't meet the specifications on its own. And the blends, except for this one, our blend stayed well and truly above specification for 10,000 cycles of running through those machines with, toothed blades or teethed blades. I'm not sure the grammar on that one. So we well and truly blitzed the results. So that is an exciting future. We're now in negotiations with the Victorian State Government to put it onto a public road. If there's a council here that would like to be one of the first to do it, the State Government is moving very slowly, but we're hoping a decision is imminent on getting it onto a public road to actually demonstrate it, because it's passed all the tests and specifications that any surface needs to go down on roads. So to summarise, there's plenty of opportunities for glass not to be in landfill, not to be roadfill, as in hidden as crushed glass being a sand substitute. That's still a good or a better environmental outcome, but we can use glass as a feature in its own right. And there's no reason why in a pedestrian environment we can take out the substituted material and we can actually use, or we could be using the glass out of your bins as a surface in its own right for at least a pedestrian environment without even blending it like we did in this case. You don't need to be purchasing paints, you don't need to be sending asphalts and concretes to landfill. You can put thin coatings of glass on things and have safe, compliant and beautiful looking surfaces in your public spaces. So if you want to find out more, please contact us. There's contact details on the screen there, and we've got plenty of LinkedIn content on our different channels and YouTube videos and the like, but of course you can contact me as well, and I'll be happy to talk to you, and I'll be around for a few more hours today before going to the airport like Hannah. But yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dave. It's always good to see some real-world applications that can be used. So, I don't know about you, but I would definitely get lost in that car park they made. That was confusing. We're on to Annie Walker, Senior Coordinator of Circular Economy at SS Rock.
Hi everyone, great to be here, and it's been great chatting to many of you over the last couple of days as well. I know we've had a lot of presentations, so I'm going to try and keep you awake. But yeah, if you haven't heard of SSROC before, it's Southern Sydney Regional Organisation of Councils, and we work with 12 Sydney councils on joint projects and procurements, and sometimes with different, challenges. We'll often work, across New South Wales or across Sydney, and textiles is one where we've tried to have a Sydney metro approach. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. Before we start though, just so we're all on the same page, I just wanted to have a quick call out. Have a look around the room. What textiles can you see? I just want to make sure we all understand what I mean when I talk about textiles. So just call it out. Don't worry about putting your hands up. Chairs, yep. So carpet, fantastic. Linen, yep. The partitions have got some fibre attached to some sort of a board, yep. And behind me, curtains as well. So yeah, textiles includes more than just clothing. It's in so many different products. And basically, if we want a really simple definition, it's woven fibres, whether they're synthetic or natural or blended. As I said, it's in lots of products. So today I'm going to cover why textiles is an important material stream to start looking into if you haven't already. And how to reduce textiles waste in council operations and services. I'm also going to talk a little bit about improving textiles data. We're a little bit further behind with textiles than we are perhaps with organics. So there's a bit of catching up to do in this space. And also about supporting textile recovery in your community. So whether you're a council or another organisation involved in this space. I'm going to be particularly talking about collection and education. And I'm also going to touch on uniforms because there's so many organisations here today that probably purchase uniforms, so that's something to really worth looking at as well. So why is textiles an important material stream to focus on? So just in curbside bins in Sydney, back in 2019, we analysed a lot of the available data on textiles, and it looks like we've got about 52,000 tonnes of textiles just in red and yellow bins. So that's quite a lot. More recently, the design team behind the Clothing Product Stewardship Scheme that's in development at the moment, they've done quite a lot of data analysis, and they've got some really good reports on the Australian Fashion Council's website. And they've estimated in those that there's about 270,000 tonnes of clothing going to landfill every year in Australia. So huge amounts. But when I'm talking about the curbside bins, I'm talking about more than just clothing, all types of textiles there. And we're doing a lot of curbside audits at the moment, and so I wouldn't be surprised if we see that number increase. But in the red letter bin, it's about 5% of the general waste stream. Might not sound like much, but when you times that by Sydney's population, it's massive. It's also heavy and costly to landfill, and it impacts downstream sorting. You might be wondering what that picture on the screen is. It's a massive textile snake from Veolia's Woodlawn facility. So that's a mechanical biological treatment facility down at Woodlawn, which is near Goulburn. And what happens is, textiles have a lot of long stringy items that get caught in machines, a little bit like soft plastics. So think about like trackies with a rope around the waistband, or, hoodies, shoelaces, those kind of things easily get stuck in machines. Then other items get stuck in with them, and it becomes this big globby mess that you literally need a crane to lift out. And then that means that facility has to shut down while you're doing that kind of operation. So it can impact downstream sorting depending on what type of facility you have. It's also surprisingly the fourth highest contaminant in the recycling bin. This always surprises me that people would actually put textiles in the recycling bin, but I think it goes back to that kind of wish recycling. You just hope that you don't want to put the shoes in the red bin. Maybe if you put it in the yellow bin, there'll be a magical fairy at the MRF that will just do something meaningful with those for you. So textiles are definitely in there, and perhaps they're coming up a little bit higher because they're heavy as well. And textiles is a growing problem. So I think this is a material stream that we need to kind of get our heads around, because it's going to keep growing over the next decade. And, you know, the recent data that's been done by the Australian Clothing Product Stewardship Scheme, they have estimated that Australians consume 56 new items every year, which is mind-boggling. And worldwide clothing sales are also expected to triple by 2050. There's a lot of overproduction in textiles as well. There's been a lot in the media, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but you know, textiles have a really high embodied carbon from the point of manufacture all the way through to disposal, and also a lot of water embodied as well. So yeah, it's a material that we, you know, when we're thinking about carbon, that we really need to think about as well. It's not all gloom and doom though with textiles. I just want to, hopefully a lot of you heard Omar's keynote speech this morning about reuse and how important it is to work on the upper levels of the hierarchy. Textiles is a stream that we can do that with, particularly with clothing. You know, there was huge reuse potential. We've got Australians in a really good behaviour of donating to charities, and charities doing an incredible job, you know, receiving huge tonnages every single week in their retail stores and through other collection avenues, and trying to reuse as much of that as they can. Where we really need to change the game is really normalising buying secondhand clothes. I think that's been talked about before today. But yeah, so we've got some really good habits in donating. We just need to get those pull-through markets in Australia as well. So moving on a little bit to what we've been doing the last couple of years. So we have developed a textiles action plan for Sydney councils. Happy for any council across Australia to have a look at that and plagiarise it. Because you know, when we looked, it was one of the first sort of local government plans to address textile waste, and it was very much a collaboration with WesRock and NESRock, and we've also brought MacArthur Strategic Waste Alliance into it as well. So basically working with Sydney Rocks and councils on a metro approach to textiles waste, and really thinking about, okay, in this really complex material stream, where can we make a difference within councils' areas of influence and control? So there's been a lot of talk in this conference about how we really need the producers to step up and take responsibility for the products that they're putting out onto the market. So I guess thinking, you know, at council's role in all of this. So it identifies priority areas for councils to reduce textile waste. It includes some regional analysis of textiles data. And we've had a lot of funding and support from the New South Wales EPA to both do the plan and also implement it. So big shout out to them. So the focus areas in the textiles plan includes data. So, you know, a lot of councils across Australia do waste audits of curbside bins. And, you know, traditionally textiles was mostly picked up in just two categories. So that one of the big things we've been looking at is doing better categorisation of textiles and audits. Education and access to collection systems has come up as an area where a lot of charities and commercial businesses that we've interviewed see councils having a role, you know, not taking full responsibility, but certainly having a role in that space. Procurement, councils are a buyer of textiles. They may not be as big as some government agencies, like, you know, you think about Department of Defence perhaps might buy a huge amount of uniforms. Councils might buy less than that. But if you think about rangers, customer service officers, maybe park staff, depot staff, often are wearing uniforms. So that's quite a lot of textiles that collectively we're buying that we can think about. Councils also have a lot of facilities. So like I said, just looking at this room, you know, you can start thinking when you're retrofitting those facilities or designing new buildings about how to reduce textile waste in carpets, in soft furnishings. And, you know, councils will run a lot of events. So thinking about, you know, could you be moving more towards digital signage? Do you actually really need those physical event banners? And if you do need them, maybe there's a way to design them to make it really easy to update them for each event rather than throwing them away. So just thinking about not creating that single-use textiles as well. And when we're procuring those things, asking suppliers, for durable items that can easily be repaired or recycled at the end of life stage. I've talked a little bit about building design in terms of facilities. A big one there, carpet is huge. I think there's a huge amount of work that could be done on carpet, but one easy thing to think about, and even in this conference centre, maybe not in this room, but in the room that I was staying in, it was all carpet tiles. So what that means is that when you've worn an area of carpet, you can just replace those individual tiles. What otherwise happens, and looks like in this room, if there's stains on this carpet, they have to replace the whole room, or if they can't get rid of the stains and they want to replace it. So that's a huge amount of waste that then ends up in landfill. Carpet is heavy. So really, in most facilities and commercial buildings, we should be using carpet tiles. Something to think about in more of the planning stages is requiring space in high-rise for source separation of a number of materials, including textiles, well, mostly clothing in that instance. So this is about when you have a lot of residents living in a building, you might have enough volumes to justify having a clothing bin collection. And if you're going to have a clothing bin collection, you might also have e-waste, and you might also have bulky cardboard or polystyrene or soft plastics. So at the very planning stage, you want to require developers to think about that. And, we've got some Sydney councils already thinking like that and have done a lot of work in source separation of different material streams, such as Canterbury-Bankstown, where in one of their DCPs, their development control plans, they're actually requiring buildings of a certain size with a certain amount of units to have 9 metres squared space in that high rise, so that you've actually got room for source separated collection. So some really great innovations like that. So I'm just going to talk quickly about data, and then Anne Prince, who's coming on next from APC Waste Consultants, is going to go into the detail. But you may not be aware that there was a new national standard for waste data and reporting done by Blue Environment for federal government. And in that, they recommend more granular categories for textiles. So like I said, in the beginning, there was really only 2. Textiles and carpet was one category, and the other category was leather and rubber. So it's really expanding that so we can understand what types of textiles are coming through curbside systems. And already we've had about 13 Sydney councils that are starting to use those more detailed sorting categories. And I just recommend any councils that are planning a waste audit to really make sure that they do that for textiles, because otherwise, you don't get that broken down data, and we're really trying to improve the data that's available on textiles. To add to that, we've also done 3 audits of council-managed clothing collections. So that's where you have drop-off events or community recycling centres that are run by councils, and we've audited 3 different locations to just see what kind of quality is coming through, how much of it potentially needs to be reprocessed down a recycling pathway, how much of it is actually suitable for donation, and Anne's going to talk more about that. We've also done some market research. So we did a request for information to organisations involved in textiles recovery, and particularly clothing recovery, interviewed about 14 charities and commercial organisations working in this space, also had about 22 surveys, and we've had lots of discussions since then as well. And that was a huge learning experience for us, so that we could really understand the value chain with these different textile materials and what some of the opportunities for local government are. And one of the things that we really heard from that market research was, there's potential for councils to work more in collection of textiles if they've got the capacity to do that. Mostly in clothing where there's that high reuse potential. But yeah, it depends obviously on individual councils and what sort of resources they have and what collection systems are already in their community. So just some examples up on the slide there. We've got
Some councils collecting at community recycling centres like Hornsby Council. That picture there of the purple lidded bins is from their huge CRC down in Sydney. They've got like 19 wheelie bins there collecting a huge amount of clothing every week. There's also a picture there of clothing recycling bin in a high density building, like in a mud. So that can really make sense if you've got enough residents in that building to justify a collection. In the middle picture is Ku-ring-gai Council's community drop-off event. So they ran a just clothing and bed linen donation drive, and they collected 15 tonnes of used clothing, which was processed by Vinnie's, and 10 tonnes of linen, which was processed by Blocktex. So they had a huge response, even though it was raining, to their event. And I've just put up on the screen there an example of a clothing bin, just to kind of show that that is another form of collection that's not necessarily run by councils, but some councils in Sydney, for example, will allow clothing bins in some public spaces. For some, that's too difficult. But you know what we're starting to see is more clothing bins in shopping centres where people are actually purchasing, clothing. So we're trying to get that connection right at that consumption point. And I just wanted to share that one as well, because we know we're sort of moving away from that metal bin look as well. So it's good to see some innovations in that space. Obviously, aside from council collections, there's a whole lot of other different options. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about retail collections. As I said earlier, charity stores are doing an incredible job. If you think about all the different charity stores across Australia, and actually Lara's map of Recycle Mat kind of brought that home for me, you know, that's a huge amount of real estate devoted to trying to capture clothing for reuse. And I think without them, we'd be a bit stuffed, to be honest, because there'd be a lot more in landfill. So huge shout out to them. Where I'm really excited in terms of thinking about what do we want to see in 5-10 years with textiles, I want to see a lot more producers having in-store retail collections. You know, if you've rented out a space and you're making a lot of profit from selling clothing, you should have some of that space dedicated to collecting it. And we're seeing a little bit of movement in that space. So the picture in the middle there is H&M's in-store collection. They'll take any brand of clothing and pretty much in any condition as long as it's clean. And Zara is also doing similar. Country Road are taking only their brand and then giving it to Red Cross. Sheridan, in their boutique stores, so not every store, are collecting bed linen, also any brand, which is great, good on them. And hopefully, there'll be a day where we can go to any shopping centre in Australia and there'll be some sort of clothing collection in that retail complex, that it's not just left to councils to sort out. Other options for clothing collection is door-to-door. So I think sometimes we forget, we think about, calling Vinnie's or Salvos or one of the other charities that offer a pick-up service if you're moving and you've got some good quality furniture. We often forget that you can also call them for clothing as long as you've got enough to actually justify them coming to pick it up, and as long as it's in good condition. So that's one option. I noticed recently that Salvos actually have a postal service as well, where they'll encourage people to send in donations if you can't get to one of their stores, and they'll offer a free postage label for that service. So that was pretty cool to see. There's also commercial organisations like King Cotton who run clothing cleanup, and they'll collect from Sydney residents for free. Recycle Smart, who are at the conference here, they will work with councils to offer a door-to-door collection service. SCR Group are also starting to be in that space. So there is different options out there for wearable clothing that can be considered if you want some of those door-to-door, more mobile solutions. For unwearable clothing, which of course is the more challenging part of the material stream, there's starting to be a bit of movement in that space. So at the moment we've got Apparel and Textiles Recycling Australia offering a paid postage service. So a consumer can bundle up their clean textiles. It doesn't matter if they're ripped, as long as they're clean. and they can post it they can basically go online and book a pickup. So I've done that with both those providers, and you might pay $25 or something around that realm. It depends how much you want to send back, and you fill up your box. You can actually fit a lot of textiles in like a 10-kilo box, and then it's picked up from you, and then they will usually shred it and turn it into what depends on which one you go with, but either a soft infill fibre or into like a recycled yarn. So there's some options out there, and they're getting boxes from all over Australia. So that's pretty cool to hear that, there are some people seeing the value of that and willing to actually pay for it. They're starting to partner with brands as well and offering like discounts to try and make that cost to the consumer, more attractive. Block techs are also picking up from corporations as well, and doing uniforms. So there's a few more players in Australia at the moment, which is great. Oh, time. Okay, cool. And of course, there's also peer-to-peer reuse. So there's a lot of online platforms for secondhand clothing, and we're also seeing some rental platforms. So for those fashionistas that want to wear the different things every month, you can have a subscription service, and Glam Corner is an example of that. Okay, so just also education is another big space where councils are already probably doing a lot. Clothing swaps have been done by councils for quite a long time, really successfully. Clothing repair workshops are done by a number of councils in Sydney, also really successfully. Upholstery workshops, there's lots of options there. And all councils, even if you don't have a budget for doing anything with textiles, can at least make sure that your information about what to do with clothing that's still in good condition or in poor condition, what to do with it, you can make sure that messaging is there. So we tested this with charities and commercial reuse organisations to make sure we were saying the right things about what they could accept. And I've shared a few of those messages on the slide there. But I guess the main takeaway I would say is, hardly anyone can accept underwear, so forget about that. And clothing really needs to be in good condition for it to be reused by charities. They don't have time to sit there and sew on a button. So if you want that cardigan to be reused, sew it on yourself, because otherwise it's probably not going to get reused in Australia, because doing repair when, lots of tons are coming through your door is really, really difficult. So it really needs to be clean and dry. Mould can be an issue, so it can't be damp. No rips, no stains, tears or missing parts. I've talked a little bit about some of the options for unwearable clothing. Not everyone knows that there is actually a recycling program for old sports shoes, hiking shoes and thons. So Rebel, Sports, Athlete's Foot, all the kind of major retailers and sellers of sports shoes should have a recycling bin in their stalls. It may not be visible, but consumers can take shoes to them, and then it's sent down to Save Our Souls in Victoria, who turn it into like they mix it with recycled tyres and turn it into like gym flooring and retail store flooring. So that's pretty cool. And also EPA have got some digital assets on illegal dumping as well. I'm just going to touch really briefly on uniforms and then I'll finish up. So if you're procuring uniforms, there's a couple of things that you could include in your specs there. Happy to chat to anyone about that in more detail later. We're also doing a uniform recycling trial with 8 Sydney councils, which we're pretty excited about. It's only started in the last month, and we'll have more information this time next year and a case study on that, which hopefully can help other organisations. I'd just like to say it's pretty affordable, so definitely worth looking into. Clothing Product Stewardship Scheme is coming, and just wanted to mention there are end markets for recycled textiles in terms of there's products being made from them like recycled yarn, underlay, rugs, mats, insulation, etc. But it's a slowly building space, so hopefully that's where we'll see a bit of development over the next couple of years. And summing up, so if you haven't worked in textiles yet and you're thinking about, okay, what can I do in this space? I think the first protocol is probably to chat to charities in your local area, They have been working in these supply chains for decades. You can learn so much from them, and the potential to collaborate is huge. Collection, I think thinking about it holistically, thinking about Lara's map, what are the gaps in terms of access in your area? Amanda from City of Sydney did that really great map about, being able to walk to different spots. So just thinking about in your local area, where are the gaps that you want to address? Education, a lot of councils are doing that really well. So just making sure that your information about where to take clothing is up to date. And think about, councils as a procurer of textiles and where you can reduce waste in some of those things like uniforms, carpets, events, even rags. There's some good options for as well. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Annie. And we'll go straight on. Anne Prince is the director of A Prince Consulting, here to talk to you more about textiles.
Okay, it's me and lunch, and I'm going to do 20 minutes in 5. Just watch me. So I'm just here to give you a brief overview about data. So let's just get to the chase. So we've currently got about 6% of textiles are in the red bin, and as Annie's mentioned, there's between 0.5 and 1.5% of textiles in the yellow bin where it's not supposed to be. It's about the third or the fourth largest contaminant in your yellow bin, and I think it's because people are I don't think it's so much about apathy and arrogance. I think it's more about the wish. They want to recycle. They think if it goes in the bin, maybe it'll just get recycled magically at the MRF. But it's a contaminant, so we need to get it in the right bin and we need to get it in the right system. So in terms of curbside, the New South Wales EPA has got a list of 73 categories that we currently do audits to. One of those categories is textiles, carpet. The other category is rubber and leather. So that tells us a big number. It doesn't tell us what it's made up of. So what we've tried to do, working with SSROC and their member councils and other councils in Sydney, when we've been doing waste audits, is suggesting to them, let's go and do a bit of a mine into what is actually in those textiles. So we've now got 18 categories, and I'm the girl that always said, whoever developed 73 categories at the EPA has never done an audit, and now I'm doing 18. But what we've basically done is looked at classifying it by wearable, unwearable, carpet, by linen and toweling, by soft furnishings, and then by other textiles, and then also by fibre type. And so we need to know what these materials, not only what they are, but what they're made out of, because depending what they're made out of, whether they're a blend or a synthetic or a natural, as to what their pathway is going to be for reuse or for recycling. And the purpose of this slide is just to show that within a few of the councils that we've already done some analysis on, there is significant variability. And as Annie said, there's 52,000 tonnes of textiles that are in the domestic waste bins in Sydney every year. So that's why we're worrying about it, because it's something we need to address as the next part of the hierarchy. In terms of, you can do it by weight, you can do it by volume, you can do it by count, and depending which way and what the measurement is as to what the answer is. So this just shows you the proportions by weight, but then if you do it by count, so particularly for the wearable component, the charitable sector want to know how many items they're going to get, not how much it's going to weigh. And depending what the item is and whether it's winter or summer, and the weight of the fabric and the weight of the item as to how many items they're going to have to get to receive and then process through their system. In terms of drop-off, we've also done, we've now moved to 28 categories. So with Annie and some other great staff that she has and great expertise, we were able to then split the clothing up into wearable, new with tags, good quality or low quality. And how we define high and low quality was based on the brand name. So if it's Country Road, it went into good. If it was a Target, Kmart, lower end, it went into a lower quality because it has a lesser life. And then we looked at reusable or unwearable clothing as to whether it was suitable for recycling or whether it was only suitable for landfill. We split the linen and the towels into exactly that, bed linen and towels. We split the leather and rubber into were they shoes or were they accessories. And then the non-textiles really is all about contamination, where people have just put the wrong things in the bin. And a lot of the other textiles were things like masks, because masks are made out of textiles. Post-COVID, there is a massive mask. So if we did this at a different time in a different place, the mask factor may not be such an issue. It has certainly been a significant proportion in these audits that we've been doing. So again, ongoing data collection is important because textiles will change over time. So there's our 28 categories with Annie and Co on the floor going item by item to work out what it's made from. So it is time consuming. And there's a photo of the masks, heaps and heaps of masks. The other thing that goes into the other category are things like mats and rugs and sheepskin things, all sorts of other bits and bobs. So far we've done 3 drop-off events, and we're planning to do some more, because we're also looking at seasonality as to what people are disposing of. So we did an ongoing CRC, which was the Hornsby Council example. We did a once a quarter drop-off in a group of councils, and in 2 locations in the one council, and then a once a month collection, which was for a couple of councils that shared a similar drop-off location. And we've only got 1.5 tonnes of waste, textiles, and we've got 11 cubic metres. And then we've split that into 28 categories. It just felt like 82. So what we were really trying to do is get a proof of concept. How long does it take to do it, and what are we going to find out? And so what we found out from what goes to drop off versus what goes into the bin is it's much more about wearable clothing, a significant amount of clothing and a significant amount of wearable clothing. And of the wearable clothing at drop off, 50% of it is good quality, 46% of it is reasonable low quality, but 4% on average and 6% in one location is textiles clothing with tags that have never been worn, and in some cases never even taken out of the plastic. So we are, consumerism has gone mad, and I think War on Waste and Craig really shone a light on the wear it once, which is certainly not my mentality, but the whole the whole social media thing where you can't be seen in the same thing twice and post a pic is just gone completely mad. And I think because clothing has got to a certain price point, younger people can maybe buy it more regularly, and then they just decide whether they like it or not like it when they get home, and they're not inclined to take it back if they change their mind. So that was quite an interesting statistic, I thought. This is just showing us what the percentages are by the type of fabric, so whether it's blended, natural or synthetic, because that will determine the pathway. So we've got a small amount of data, and what we need to do is get more rigour in the data. So, all that slide is trying to show is that these are the percentages, but they're the error bars. So the truth of each of these statistics is somewhere in between that error bar, and what we need to do is get those error bars much closer together so we've got a more accurate picture of what is going on. The difference between curbside and drop-off is shown here, and as I said, 50%, the blue is 50% is wearable material that goes through drop-off versus only 13% of what's being put in the bins. So, and it's a very small sample. So the key messages, I told you I'd do it in 5, is we need more data, we need it now. So anyone who's doing a waste audit, to reiterate what Annie said, if you are doing an audit, the incremental cost of adding on another 28 categories or another 18 is not that much. And I think we all need more data. We need to determine the minimum sample size that we need based on doing more samples so we can see what the composition is, what the accuracy is. We need an agreed method, so we've come up with these classifications and categorisations. We need to get that defined so everybody is singing from the same song sheet and everyone is collecting data in the same way. We need to do it both at curbside and at drop-off because there are 2 avenues by which people are using. And we need a central data repository where all of this data goes to so it can be used collectively for the collective good by everybody. I've suggested that might be SS Rock because they're doing they're hosting the textile action plan, but it can go to the EPA or anywhere. But I just think rather than having all this data in different locations, it all needs to be aggregated, which is something that Joe Pickens said yesterday. Enjoy lunch.
Imagine, I mean, just imagine where the world would be if we all moved at that speed. So it is lunchtime. We don't have any Q&As on the live stream. So what I propose is anyone who doesn't have a question and wants to go to lunch, you can head off. Anyone who wants to ask a question, come up the front and we can facilitate that sort of up the front of the room. Is there anyone who wants to have a question? Oh, well, you've all explained your presentations very well. Oh, one question here. All right, one question. You're locked in the room now.
And I just wanted to ask, are you happy to share the methodology?
So it's early days. We're piloting. I guess we're learning by doing. And so what we started doing on curbside, then when we've gone to drop off, we've done another bit. We worked out the value that you need to do counts as well as volumes, as well as weights, and we're refining the definitions. I think the list of brands is really important about what we've classified as being a low quality and a higher quality, and that's going to evolve over time as well. And we really sort of just need to, Annie and I, we need to sort of talk and with the other councils about how and who and where and what we're going to do in terms of publicising the method. It's works in progress and it's proof of concept. And that was what I was just trying to show, is that there is variability, and what we need to do is do many more samples to then be able to get an average, where at the moment the average is not an average, it's just a very small base of data.
Great.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh.
I had a question. I had a question for David about what happens at the end of the 5 to 7 years with your amazing glass coatings.
It's a good question. We've presented to the likes of Fulton Hogan and Downer, and they're actually our biggest clients. So if the road is being rebuilt, when they plane or remove the asphalt, our surface just gets mixed up, chopped up, mixed up, goes into the asphalt recycling process. Because the biggest constituent is glass, it is basically smashed up and just like the stone and things in the asphalt, no issue. If it's just worn out and going to be replaced by the same surface, then it does have to be ground off, and that does go to waste in that case, because it's not enough and it's mixed with the resin and in a small quantity. Because the actual coloured part of a bike lane is often just the bit at the intersection. Small quantities, it does end up as waste, then we put down the new surface at the end.
Okay. Any other questions? Yep, one more question here.
I got a question for you, Annie. You showed, I think it was H&M and Zara, and you spoke about Country Road having drop-off points for high-end clothing, maybe their own brand only. Have you come across anyone who is taking back and repairing and either returning to the owner or reselling? I mean, I've met a couple of people internationally who do that at very high-end brands, but have you come across any?
Yeah, nudie jeans, but they're expensive jeans.
Yeah.
But I've had a few friends actually test out their whole repair system. Patagonia, if you're ever in Sydney, their shop near Town Hall actually has a little repair booth right in the bottom of the store, which looks really fabulous. It would be so cool to see that in lots of other retail spaces. Yeah, but normally, I think you're right, it's normally higher end brands.
Yeah, well, some of the people I've met who are into this have taken the view that if you can sell jeans that are already pre-ripped, you should be able to sell jeans that are
exactly
pre-repaired, you know.
Exactly, yeah. I would just add that when we're talking about auditing brand by brand, the actual reality when we were doing those audits is that it was mostly by condition. And brands, there is some variability. So they're a good indicator. So if you've got something that you're like, oh, is this good enough for resale? Because that's essentially, when we're donating, we've got to think, can you put this straight on a hanger and sell it in a shop? Because it's not like, you know, Salvos and Vinnies have a little laundromat right there and a little repair service right there to deal with it. They just don't. So it was mostly by condition. And so if for the iffy garments where you're kind of like, oh, is this a little bit too worn, or is it just right? Then we check the brand. because it's so time consuming. You're literally looking at garments, you're looking at the armpits, you're looking at the, is there stains around the neck? Is it bally? Is it got any rips? You're looking at that first, and then if you're in doubt, then you look at the brand. So I just wanted to clarify that. Yep.
Okay. I think it's lunchtime. Thank you.